Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews, coming at you online and in print format at nicktiffany.com, in audio format wherever you get your podcasts, and even in video on YouTube, TikTok, Reels, pretty much wherever you have social media, you can find us. Today I'm back with another really exciting interview as part of the Seattle International Film Festival going on. This is the 50th anniversary of SIFF. It has been so much fun so far. And it has just been such a full circle experience for me. And that kind of continued with Chasing Time, the film that we're going to be talking about today. I was able to sit down with co-directors Jeff Orlowski-Yang and Sarah Keogh. Yang directed Chasing Ice back in 2012, which is a documentary kind of capturing different glaciers, how they've been melting, taking photos every day and compiling that evidence and data into really tangible, irrefutable evidence. And Chasing Time is now a new kind of companion short film that kind of caps almost 20 years of work, but really is also an ode to mentorship, returning him with the first initial subject of Chasing Ice, Jame Balog, and his extreme ice survey. You know, it looks at so much more than just what's happening in nature, but it examines the human experience. It gets you to care in so many different ways. I'm so thankful to have been a part of this conversation because Chasing Ice was a really formative documentary for me as far as understanding documentary film and really being able to discuss it with people as I was started coming into my own in film criticism. So it was just such a great conversation. I'm so happy and excited to be sharing this with y'all. So without further ado, here's our interview for Chasing Time. Alrighty. Well, Jeff, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. My name is Nick Tiffany of NT Movie Reviews. It's a publication I've been doing myself for a little over 12 years, and watching Chasing Time just brought back a flood of memories because in 2012, that was the first year that I kind of got into the world of film criticism. A mentor of mine who's still a mentor today, his name is Mike Ward, great family friend, brought me to some early film screenings and kind of embedded me into this world of film criticism. And so for that year of 2012, 2 times a week, he was driving me 45 minutes into downtown Seattle to go be with like-minded people, watching all sorts of different films. And one of the coolest things that he did was he put on a film series in our small town. I don't know if you're familiar, Sarah, with Carnation or Goodall.
Yeah, yes.
But he put together a film series kind of centered around documentaries and different events that were going on in the world that he wanted people to have an opportunity to see and talk about. And so that was my first experience really watching a documentary, having the time to talk about it with people afterwards. And we started off with Chasing Ice. And so I was looking at my 2012 review of Chasing Ice. And I just remember sitting there with all these people watching that glacier calve at the end of it, and just how devastating some of it was, irrefutable so much of it was as well. What I loved, though, about your film, and just a line that really stuck with me, was how do you say thank you to a mentor? Because now, after an 8-year hiatus, I'm back doing this again. He's still in this world, but the dynamic and the relationship is so different. And so I want to know, what was it like for you coming back a little bit older, a little bit more mature, being back with James again, and how that relationship kind of changed?
Well, thanks for having us, Nick. But everything you're describing is like what the last couple of years have felt like, of really kind of living and reliving memories and experiences from the past that were, foundational and shaped me and shaped the work in so many ways. And to try and see it through a new lens, and to try to see it in a way that we can share it with the public. And that's also where Sarah, as a co-director, was able to help and provide fresh eyes and fresh perspective on something that, it's almost too close to home for me in some ways.
Sure.
And then how do we, I just love hearing what you described about what that experience was like for you, because these landscapes for me have been so formative. And the experience of this story and the experience of this team, wanting it to be seen and recognized and heard. That's why we made this movie. So it's very cool just to hear your reflection.
It was one of those things, I think, for me, as far as viewing film, though, too, was formative in the sense of perhaps I used to look at documentaries as just, oh, this is an issue film, or maybe, the teenage me when I wanted to go see Fincher films or different things.
Right.
I'm like, oh, why would I watch a documentary? It's a nature thing. It's a this, and it's easy to be reductive, especially about global issues and things like that. And so a credit I give Mike Ward, my mentor, is just kind of giving me the tools and an environment to really
teach you see in a different way.
Totally. Absolutely. And I think it's also a credit to what y'all did with the film, especially with Chasing Time. I think having almost that flip book style time lapse, seeing these glaciers move, then also kind of giving that visual perspective too of, I love the acknowledgement of how hard it is for our minds to remember something that isn't there anymore. So I think giving some of those detailed graphs was a really great way that y'all kind of did that. And so through that, though, of course, I think because of that, though, it is, I would hate to say there is no discussion. When you watch this film, it is all there for you to witness. And I think watching even just this, 40-minute short and feeling some of the same amount of devastation I maybe felt watching Chasing Ice the first time. What was it like looking out and seeing lakes, full lakes, and walking through some of that where none of that was before?
I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like, imagine going back to visit your childhood home after 15 years of not being there and seeing that all the houses in the entire neighborhood are missing, right? Just like picture block after block after block of where you grew up just looking completely different. And you're like, how does it look so different? And you're trying to like, what did it look like? And trying to recall. And yet these landscapes are changing on such an impossible scale.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people who are tourists and go to these places, they don't have the time reference, right?
Sure.
And as you're saying, like, the cameras for us have been this tool to document and record these changes that are imperceptible. One of the wild things, we didn't really do that this much on this project, but there are times when we would really camp out by a glacier and let a camera roll, even while you're just standing there and sitting around and looking at the glacier, and you don't notice anything change. But when you watch the footage of a couple of hours, you're like, holy shit, like so much changed on that glacier in 2 hours that we didn't even notice while we're staring at the glacier.
Sure.
And like these imperceptible changes that can happen. So to take that and magnify it over 15 years and to be able to watch, these are huge geologic features shifting and morphing under our noses, like happening all the time. And that is the human contribution to climate change that we don't see on a daily basis.
Sure.
And I think that's what we were hoping to convey for people. So I don't know, like going back and seeing lakes and rivers, it really was just like a new universe.
But not even just lakes and rivers, like even as a person who joined the team later on and wasn't there for, the early phases of the project, to have seen the archival footage and the photography around what these glaciers looked like back in the day and hearing the stories of you all having to, prepare for some remote destinations and the camping and the packing and everything involved and the clothing. But now, 15 years later, there's parking lots for tourism where the glacier used to be. And
Okay.
That and to see how much more accessible these
kind of disorienting.
Very disorienting.
It is so disorienting to realize how much has changed as someone who's new to the team, and just seeing the tourism that has built around these glaciers now that weren't really as accessible back in the day. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Sarah, because I was very curious watching Chasing Ice again and kind of going back through that and watching this new film. I understand you've got some background with Sundance. The two of you have worked on, I believe, your last project together as well. Yeah. I'm sure you knew that this wouldn't be a cushy documentary, just in terms of what you're signing up for, in terms of knowing I'm going to be going out, I'm going to be filming, but I'm going to be doing it in sub-zero temperatures. I'm going to be excavating and all that. What do you remember about watching Chasing Ice that really spoke to you, that kind of, or what really made you feel like I'm ready to go put my life out on the line to be out there in this environment because it's that important to me?
Well, so I saw not just Chasing Ice, but Chasing Coral, and it was the brilliance of the filmmaking that made me feel like I had to be a part of the team, because the personal impact that it had on me and how much it stayed with me to see those visuals and to go through that emotional journey through those two documentaries. When I met Jeff and Larissa at Sundance, I was telling everyone they are my dream filmmakers to work with because of how powerful their storytelling was. And so, I wasn't necessarily signing up for the backpacking and the
frostbite.
Sure.
But I was like, I'm gonna get over that hump in my mind because I wanted to be involved with that level of storytelling because through working at Sundance, I saw the power that storytelling holds and being able to change minds and build empathy and open eyes to these types of issues. And so I was going to do whatever it took to be involved with this team. And Jeff was very kind enough to train me ahead of time, to encouraging me to, go around with a backpack filled with cans and liter bottles that weighed, 30 to 35 pounds. And I was just training for an entire couple months.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a really smart way to go about that.
Yeah. And I think our team, we've gotten more and more conscious of safety. Not like we were reckless in the past, but there's a different. We were going in with a different energy around production this time around like knowing, hey, there's only so much that we need to film out in the field. And how do we do it safely? And how do we, some of these look like very, very steep mountains and steep cliffs, but it wasn't like we were ever in a position of recklessness. Right. So I think for me, the field work is the stuff that is the most fun. It's like getting to go out to these places and honestly, just like being in a place for 10 days without your cell phone, pinging all the time. It's just a beautiful thing.
It's like a religious experience.
And Iceland is a spiritual experience just in and of itself. And so I think in some ways, if we do justice to the Icelandic landscape and to capture the essence and the spirit of that country and that place, this film, Chasing Time, is really centered around that story of the very last camera that was still standing in Iceland and taking that last camera down for this 15 plus year project, and trying to pay homage to a place that has transfixed all of us.
Absolutely. I don't know if either of you were fortunate enough to see the last couple nights. I mean, this was the first time I can remember in Seattle memory, they always tell you the Aurora Borealis is out tonight or some comet's happening, and it's almost always too cloudy here to witness anything. And in the last 2 days, I've just seen stunning imagery that would make me feel like I was in Iceland or that I was somewhere far more north than I was. And just listening and seeing people's reactions to that, almost on like a spiritual scale, that is something that watching your film, I mean, it brings out, I feel like, this expedition type person in you. You want to go and be in these places and just take in that beauty. And I wanted to ask, was there, outside of what you shot, was there a moment for either of you that just completely took you by surprise on this trip, that, a memory, a sight, something that you saw that will last, you think, for a lifetime for you?
That's a great question. One of the most memorable moments for me was when we were up at the Isle 5 location interviewing James. And it was just such a beautiful day. Well, I mean, it was Iceland, so the weather was constantly changing. We were dealing with wind and rain. But there was a moment when the sun did come out, and we were just having such an intimate and emotional moment with James as we were talking about his cancer diagnosis. And I just remember getting chills as he was sharing this story of what it was like to receive that news. And it was just this really, this moment of all of us together, because we had other crew members there as well, and just looking around and seeing everyone crying together, like the fact that we were all so connected and so close and that we were all feeling this together, that moment stuck out in my mind as, this is the story, this is what we're here to do, this is the moment.
Absolutely.
Is going to be like the emotional climax of the film.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through your question, and there's so many different thoughts that come to mind, and maybe two just to share for right now. But when you're talking about interviewing James, a lot of people could be very aware of the camera when being filmed. And something that we did with James was that we did a lot of conversations just in a living room with just audio, similar to this, just like let the microphones capture the conversation. And we were trying to work with James to get to deeper and deeper layers of reflections on life and mortality and time and cancer and processing that. And so a lot of the movie came not from being filmed out in Iceland, but came from a living room conversation where we could just, go deep on what does it mean for him to reflect back on this life's worth of work. That's most of the audio that drives the film is coming from those types of conversations. But then I think more to your question, there's so many places in Iceland that are magical. I'm thinking of like a sunset kayak trip that we did on this beautiful lagoon, and it's just peaceful and still and dead quiet and like windless, which is rare out there. And we're just like in these kayaks during not just golden hour, it's like golden 6 hours. Like
it just never went down.
Like it doesn't get dark sometimes of the year, and magical things like that in Iceland. And we spend a lot of the time in the film on this this beach that has black sand and icebergs all over it, and the magical like creations of nature that are constantly changing and shifting. And every time you go back there, it looks different, and there are different places of inspiration to find and see in those icebergs that are constantly churning. And we got to, not for filming purposes, we went to some locations in Iceland that our location manager took us to, these like black sand fields that, I mean, it's just like, not just, I think it was where they filmed Interstellar and like,
Wow.
And our location guy like knows Iceland like the back of his hand and took us to some of his natural spots. And
Cool.
Iceland is a really special.
Yeah.
I had never seen beaches like that. I guess I never would have imagined that there were black sand beaches. And so that moment where it's like, can we maybe just sit down here for like 30 minutes, I mean, I loved that because it's something I say. So up near kind of the Forks area, here in Washington, if you get out far enough, you're near the Hoh rainforest and you've got these trees that almost start growing out sideways. And if you woke up, I tell people, if you woke up on the beach there and you look around, you see the type of trees, you would never imagine that you were in Washington State. You would feel like you were, I mean, there's a part of it that almost in how the trees grow feels like you might be in Japan or something like that, or the way that the trees grow there. So watching this idea of a beach and this idea of this black sand and everything there just felt so different. I never would have assumed it was like that there, but how cool of an experience to take in a day at the beach, but just in the most opposite kind of setting.
A day on the beach with icebergs and glaciers all around you.
Those ice diamonds, that was pretty fascinating to watch as well, and just the fleeting moment though of those before they melt. There, so much in the film is just an analogy for what is happening on that grand scale, and I think y'all did a really fantastic job. Also, I think the decision to make this a short rather than a full feature, I think does lend itself well, especially in pairing it with Chasing Ice. I was bummed I had to work yesterday because I would have loved to make the double feature downtown, but I watched Chasing Ice again last night in preparation, and so it's a testament to, I think, what you're able to do with those audio interviews, with the scenery, even the still photography. I mean, there's so many moments with just a little bit of music soaring over some of these glaciers, the color, the depth of some of them, it's astounding. So I wanted to give you a kudos on that, just because watching both of them, it didn't feel like any time had passed by, and by the end it was like, oh, it's over already.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely. I was reading an interview that y'all had given where you were talking about Jane Goodall and just her inspiration, and I think when I think of middle school and high school, she is certainly one of the figures or one of the people I remember watching either in class or learning about, who people just gravitated to and they loved her. Even if they didn't totally know her work, her passion and care for the environment, so many things just shone through. And I think a lot of that does shine through with your film. And I'm curious to know what you hope maybe to inspire in some of the younger generation as well who may watch it, whether it's pick up a camera and get out there and to record, or to really spend the time in nature and understanding what it is you might have a connection to and what you feel you can show the world.
I love that question. Lot of thoughts running through my mind right now, especially as you referenced Jane, and maybe just to share a little bit about her and her influence on me as a mentor through all of this. I got to meet Jane when I was in high school, and she's become a dear friend and mentor and guide in countless ways. And one of the things that she does so beautifully is that she never speaks from a place of attacking or criticism. She speaks with like an openness and a loving invitation into her world and into her story, and she has you eating out of the palm of her hand. And she will lecture in front of hundreds or thousands of people. Like literally, I've seen her like do book signings for 4 hours after a lecture, and she stays for every single person. But she'll share her story and her story of going out to explore and to see the chimpanzees and to learn and to be with them. And then her story morphs into her becoming an activist kind of seamlessly. And you don't even notice when in her storytelling she's now like an activist fighting for a cause. And as a listener, you're just along for the ride the whole time. And one of the things that I think we are struggling with a lot right now, especially with social media, especially with the way algorithms push thought, and our film, The Social Dilemma, of course, goes into all of that. I think we've just lost a place of coming together. Like we've lost bridge building. Like we live in a world of polarized conversation in such a deep way, and it's harder and harder and harder for people to come together and find common ground on anything. And I think one of the things that we tried to do in Chasing Time, and I think we've been working on in all of our films, is how do you not preach through the filmmaking?
Sure.
And how do you invite people in to hopefully have an emotional experience and to learn through feeling, through an embodied sense of like something that you're experiencing inside, and to shift somebody's heart and mind through that open, loving invitation. I think that's something where and I forget the core of your question.
You're totally fine.
But it's this notion of if we're able to do more bridge building and to bring people together, and to share and to empathize with each other, I think that's just what we're all like yearning for right now in society.
Absolutely. I sent my wife a really cheesy text the other day, just a couple days into the film festival. There's just something so cool about being around people who are passionate about film, who are passionate about creators and storytelling. And so it's one thing to watch, and it's why I wanted to try to make it yesterday if I could. There's one thing to watch a film at home on your own, but then to watch it with an audience who cares the way that you do, who cries, who laughs, who shares in that sense of community. That is a powerful thing. And I sent her the text. I was like, don't call me cheesy, but I'm like, the theater was moved today. The people, you could audibly tell, people who I've talked to about this film, there's no way that it doesn't move people.
I think just one more thing to add there, like there's this spectrum between content and art.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
We are so inundated with so much content, and like we are willing to spend hours and hours and hours consuming mindless content. But on the other side of that is art that makes you feel something and makes you experience something. And like maybe you find that on YouTube, but probably not.
Sure.
Right? But what you're describing there is like films still provide, hopefully, and they can provide that level of art and expression and people trying to say something that can affect you emotionally and change the way you see the world. And like I want more of that.
Absolutely.
I want more of that for myself and for the world, and that's the stuff that can move us.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, to that note of what you're speaking to of community, that's the message we really wanted to come out of the film as well, not just around mentorship, but finding your community.
Yeah.
And so we've been sharing at the end of the film, there's this relay race line that is really the core of the story of the work not just being a sprint, or it's not a sprint nor a marathon, but it's a relay race, and we all run our leg and then pass the baton of knowledge and wisdom to future generations. And so
absolutely,
it is a story of how one person has had such an impact on Jeff. James, with his, just through proximity of being around him and learning and growing, Jeff was able to go on and do amazing work in filmmaking. And then through that, he's passed the baton on, not just to me, but we're inviting the public to also get involved in the movement, because we need more people on the team and to contribute to their own skills, their own passions, whatever they have to offer. And it's really easy for us as a society to feel like a sense of paralysis and depression around everything going on in the world, and feeling like, oh, what can I contribute? What can I do? I'm only, an average person. But
Sure.
that's the thing, is all of us have something to offer, no matter who you are, whether it's through art, whether it's through music, whether it's through starting a school organization or at your workplace. Whatever you have to offer is going to help contribute to climate solutions and help us build a better world.
I thought that was it was a beautiful answer. And I think that the ending and the not only the tributes almost to those locations, but that interactive way to have people there being able to contribute in a way that I feel like makes sense for our society as well. It's a cool way as far as the the transmitting of data goes. You're able to get a lot of that, compile it over here, and that work will continue. And people can go out on their own and they can do those things. I think that's a really incredible way to interact like that with the public and people who might come in on tourism and do things like that. It's just I like that passing the baton idea, because that is, we're always looking out for future generations. There might only be so much you can do in this moment, but setting things up for the future is one of the best ways to do that. And so I wanted to ask you, you were a production consultant on The Social Dilemma?
I was production coordinator.
A coordinator, okay.
Yes.
So you were production coordinator on that. You were a co-director here. From those two experiences, what have you really taken from that, and what are you looking forward to doing next in your career? Or is there something within that world of filmmaking now you feel like, okay, I want to approach stories from this angle as well now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have learned so much working with Jeff and our team at Exposure Labs around how to craft stories in a way that, as you were speaking to, touches you emotionally. Like it's one thing to just tell a story, especially a science-based story, but it's another thing to reach people. And I'm really interested in human-centered stories, and that's part of why we were leaning towards the story around James and Jeff and their mentorship and James's cancer story. And so with all of the stories that we're going to tell moving forward, it is tackling big societal issues and trying to find solutions to the things that are broken within our society. And, that's why I want to continue working on with Jeff and the team at Exposure Labs. But on my own personal journey as a filmmaker, I'm also interested in narrative scripted work. And so it's exploring, continuing to explore my own vision and voice as a director and the unique perspective I have to offer. And it's a continuing journey. And so,
it takes time.
It does take time. Yeah.
I love the optimism, though. I love how excited, though, you speak about it, and how passionate you are, though, in just that.
I remember, when I was first starting in film, and I had a film class in college, and we had to make a movie about something, and I had no idea what I could make a movie about, and I was struggling, what is this short 5-minute documentary going to be about? And it was impossible to think of the subject matter and finally come up with something and whatever it may be, right? But years and years go by, and now it's the things that I want to tell stories about, the list is so long.
Sure.
Right? It's a complete flip. But part of that is the muscle, practicing the muscle of what is my story to tell, and what can I offer, and where do I have a lens on something? And I think, Sarah, that's where this being her first directing project, finding and crafting your voice for what you want to do moving forward and what's real for you. Those are the next steps, just in terms of your career path.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. I wanted to ask, going from almost, I'm trying to think of how many years, just about 12 years or so from the first project, approaching this second project again, was there any difference in the technology, whether it's in some of the filming equipment you brought, or just, I feel like it's always one of those things, hindsight's always 20/20, and you're like, okay, what can we bring now, or what maybe will be a little easier for us to use in order to get these shots? Or
we did Chasing Ice before GoPros existed.
Oh my God.
Before drones existed, and the aerial shots were all shot from actual helicopters. And I had an action camera. There's 1 or 2 shots in Chasing Ice that had from some quote unquote action camera before GoPro existed.
Sure.
And so it's wild looking back at that and some of the footage that's in like 720, which was like state of the art at the time. So now for Chasing Time, we shot everything in 6K, and we had drones shooting in 6K, 5K, and we used a lot of aerial cinematography from drones for Chasing Time, which I think just is the perfect tool for the Icelandic landscape, and really leaning into that aerial cinematography. And I just love flying drones and getting that perspective. So it was really, really fun for this project. But from a tech perspective, it was mostly, we used Red Dragons and shot in high resolution and a lot of the aerial stuff.
Awesome.
But then also, this is the theme from Chasing Ice and throughout, the manipulation of time.
Yeah.
And so we're calling the film Chasing Time, but it's also stretching time and playing with time, both in terms of slow motion and then time lapse. So both ends of that time spectrum. So it's really been a joy. Like, I think both films really accentuate that, to be able to reinterpret the way we see the world through that manipulation.
Sure. Yeah. I love the top down, almost just slow shots over those cavernous blue and dark blue and piercing white glacier. I mean, it's stunning as it goes on. It's almost like a dolly shot, the way it just steadily moves. And I wanted to ask both of you, just in terms of when you're going out and you're creating a shot or you're looking at where you're going, are there any directors or cinematographers, more so in feature films, that you might look at and say, okay, I love the way he composes this shot, or I really want to try how they kind of filmed this? Is there some inspiration you might have more so in the narrative film world that maybe inspires some of your work?
I can't remember who the cinematographer was, but I loved Killers of the Flower Moon on that film. I don't know. I mean, I feel like Jeff is such a great director of photography that it doesn't require much directing, because we had such a shared vision around what we were envisioning. So he, as you're speaking to the stunning cinematography of these landscapes, he captures it so well and has such an eye for framing and composition, and think very intentionally as a drone photographer, thinking about how these landscapes are framed within the shot. And so there was a lot of trust already going in and having the shared vision of what we were wanting to capture. But to your question of inspiration, I just love documentaries that explore more narrative styles of shooting. Like, what was that documentary about that had the interview that was like a narrative shot? You remember what I'm talking about? It was
that we were referencing for this one, or
no, early on. Navalny, that's what it was. Great, yeah, the way that they set up that interview with Navalny, where he's like, in the center, and there's symmetry with the lights and it's just beautiful. So I'm always thinking about, how can you push those creative boundaries within documentary of not just verite, but having more creative, a creative aesthetic in the look.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know it's interesting. I'm trying to think through your question, and there's so many influences through narrative cinema in huge ways. But when we're working on a project like this, like, we weren't really referencing specific films visually. It was really like releasing that and just letting the landscape speak for itself. And so that was kind of our approach to this project, is really just trying to let the landscape do the work.
I like that. I like that a lot. Jeff, I was wondering, have you ever wanted to be a teacher of some sort in your career? And I wanted to know what you enjoyed about being able to kind of have this co-directorship, being that mentor, and did you get something out of it that maybe you weren't quite expecting?
I love teaching, and I've done different, classes in different formats. And I think for me, it's satisfying to try to convey the things that you've learned and distilled, and hopefully make it easier for somebody else. Like, oh, I earned my battle scars through these things, and maybe you don't have to. And maybe you can skip a couple steps by learning these things. With Sarah on this project, it really was like we set it up and thought of it as a mentorship process for Sarah to learn the directing process. And there's so many things that you can't talk through or teach until you're in the situation. And it's like, oh, great, we're in the sound mix now. This is what you need to be thinking about when you're going through this experience. Or, okay, now we're in the festival circuit, or now we're in the fill in the blank. And it's like, it's impossible to try to distill all of that down, but to like live those experiences. Like, you learn best by doing. And then, and in this process, I think it's just been, for me, it's been really fulfilling and fun just to be sharing, like, hey, this is what we're up to next. And these are my thoughts on it.
I love that.
So it's been fun.
Sarah, what do you feel like you maybe gained just by observing Jeff and James? Was there something that you kind of took away from the experience, little tidbits or nuggets where you're like, okay, I'm gonna save that, or
I learned so much. I mean, not just the technical filmmaking, but also how I show up in the world and how I present myself, and how I want to be a storyteller. And also, just as we were speaking to you about Jeff's worldview and the way early career being shaped by James, I feel similarly about Jeff in that I feel like he has helped shape my own worldview and my own values and the type of stories I want to tell, the type of work that I want to do, how I approach my work, how to be a leader on set as a director, and, you know, giving your collaborators the creative space and freedom to contribute what they have to offer in their own thoughts. And I feel like it really made the film better to have input from everyone we were working with. And, you know, it's just, there's that creative aspect, and then there's also just the spiritual connection with nature. And I mean, I don't know, it's just so much that I've learned. Yeah.
Just as a wrap up, is there just one thing that you never expected that you would do that on this project you ended up doing, whether that's something emotionally, something you either conquered yourself, or at one moment where you're like, wow, I never thought I could climb up this side of the mountain, or something like that? Or
there's a photo that our team sent out on one of our message threads the other day of like 6 people looking at an iceberg at the same time. Yeah, that's right. That happened.
No tongues were frozen in the okay.
I mean, honestly, I have a fear of public speaking. I was always a very shy kid growing up, and I hated school presentations. I never want to do any of this. So the fact that I've even doing these interviews
and doing them so well.
You're doing awesome. No, you're doing awesome.
Just like being on stage, it's like, I'm like, wow, I'm doing it. So yeah.
Time to get back behind the camera.
Yeah. There's a reason why I'm behind the camera.
No. Thank you both so much. This was just really, really full circle to be able to talk Chasing Ice and Chasing Time for this. You're both so wonderful. Thank you again for just such thoughtful answers.
Thank you.